Today's lesson is going to be talking about how to complain in English. So, complain, what does that mean? What does it mean to complain? So, complain can either be a verb or it could be a noun, right? So, it can be an action word or it can be a word that is talking about a person or a place or a thing. So since it's a verb, you can write it in a couple different ways, right? So you have the present tense, the simple present tense, complain, or complains with an S, right? If you say, she complains, he complains. Um, you could also say complained with an ed, complained, or complaining. That would be the continuous verb, right? Or you could have complaint with a T at the end. This version is the noun. So you would say, complain when it's the action that you're doing, or you would use complaint when it's something, right? A thing that you're talking about. I need to make a complaint. It wouldn't be, I need to make a complaining or I need to make a complain. You would say, I need to make a complaint, right? But if you're using the verb, you would say, I need to complain, or I complained yesterday about my roommate, that kind of stuff. So what does complain mean? So it means that you express you are unhappy or upset, right? Express just means to let people know, to talk about. So express you are unhappy or upset. Or it also is a formal expression that you are unhappy or upset. So expression is the noun form of express. So a formal expression is, and formal, right, means like fancy or official. It's the kind of language that we use when we are talking to other businesses or other people that are not our friends or people that we know really well. So that's what formal is. So a formal expression is that you're telling somebody that you are unhappy or upset, but you're doing it in a way that's formal. That's how you talk to people who are not your friends or family. So you have to be a little bit more polite. You have to be really clear when you're talking with them. So informal. What's an informal complaint? That's if you're just talking about something that happened, right? Something in your personal life or something that bothers you. So for example, you are upset that it snowed last night, right? So if it snowed last night, it makes you angry. You could say, I hate when it snows. That's a complaint, right? You are complaining. I hate when it snows. And that's an informal complaint. You're talking about something that you don't like, right? Or you could say, snow is the worst. That's an informal complaint. Or your roommate always leaves their dishes out, right? So it's messy all the time. You're talking to your coworker or you're talking to your friend, you'd say, they leave their dirty dishes everywhere. I'm so frustrated. I am so frustrated with my roommate, right? You could say that. Here, let me get my little pointer. So, you could say, I am so frustrated with my roommate. Right? So that's an informal complaint. That's you just telling somebody about something. Now, there are things like formal complaints where you need to talk to somebody about something that happened that needs to change because something happened that was not good or right or was not a part of your expectations, right? What you were thinking was going to happen. So for example, if your supervisor asks you to lie for them, now, that's not your job, right? To lie for your supervisor. So that's something that's a bit inappropriate, right? It is not right for them to do. So when you make a formal complaint, it means that you are going to somebody at work or a business and you are telling them something that, is wrong. So you wouldn't go to your supervisor, right? You would go to your the boss of your supervisor, or you would go to human resources, right? HR, and you would say, I need to make a formal complaint. My manager asks me to lie for them. So that's a formal complaint. And you'll see it's a little bit different, right? So these ones, you're just talking about your life. I'm so frustrated. They leave their dirty dishes everywhere. When you go and make a formal complaint, you need to put a little bit more into it than if it's just an informal complaint, right? So another formal complaint is, and it can be anywhere, right? You can do a formal complaint to the city. You can do lots of places. So your neighbor's dog bites you. So you could complain to your neighbor and say, hey, that was not okay. Can you do something about this? But then sometimes it's like, ooh, this is a little bit more serious and I need to tell somebody, right? I need to tell the city, right? I need to tell animal control. So your neighbor's dog bites you, right? And it's bleeding and you have to go to the hospital and get stitches. You would make a formal complaint to the city, right? Or to the animal control for the city. I need to make a formal complaint about a dangerous dog. Or you would say, my neighbor's dog bit me and I need to make a complaint. So that's how you would make a formal complaint. Now you'll notice that these are a little bit different from the informal, right? So formal, it's like you have to explain what happens. You're not talking about your feelings the whole time. You're explaining the situation, right? What happened. So why we complain? Why do we complain? So we complain to let people know what your expectations are, right? What my expectations are. Expectations is what you think is going to happen, right? So you get up in the morning and you expect the buses to be working or the train to be running, right? So that's an expectation. So when we complain, it means that something somewhere went wrong and we need people to know what our expectations are or what they were, right? Are, present, were, past. So sometimes we need a complaint to let our feelings out, right? That's when we usually do informal complaining. We tell people, I'm so frustrated with work right now. I'm so busy. I'm so frustrated with politics right now. We complain to help us feel better, to let our feelings out. We also can complain to make things change. Now, you do this, we complain sometimes to let people know that something that is happening is not okay, right? So we complain not just to let our feelings out, not just to let people know what our expectations are, what my expectations are, what your expectations are. It's also to make things change, to make things better. So, important things to do when you are complaining. So if you complain about someone, make sure it is something you would say directly to the person. Now, what does that mean? So if you complain about someone, you need to do it in a way that if you saw that person, if that person was in the room listening, that you would be able to still say it. And you do this just because it's polite, it's nice. If you say things that you wouldn't say to somebody in person to their face, right? In English, we say to their face. It just means talking to them in person, right? So if the person was listening to you complain, would it hurt their feelings? Or would it make them mad at you? That's the kind of things you have to think about. The other thing is you need to be clear and you need to be concise. You need to let people know what is going on. So formal complaints. So for formal complaints, where do we do these? You can do them at work, right? You can complain about something at work. You can complain to a business if you buy something and something goes wrong, or you don't get your money back when you return something, or you are charged, right? They make you pay for something that you didn't get. You can complain to a business. You can complain to the city, right? You can complain to schools, right? You can, if your kid is in school, you can complain to the school about a teacher or a schedule or something like that. You can complain about hospitals or a doctor's office. You can, call them and say, I got this bill and I was not expecting it, right? You can complain to them because it's anywhere that you have to pay for something or you are getting something from them, you can complain to them. It's where you can make a formal complaint. You can complain about anything to anyone, pretty much. So, formal complaints. And this is in most English speaking countries, but especially in the United States, you can complain about anything to anyone. So, formal complaints. This is the order that I wanted to show you on how to think about how to make a formal complaint, right? Because an informal one, you just got to tell people how you feel, right? I'm frustrated because, my sister comes home really late. That's the thing that you can complain about. You can do a formal complaint. Formal complaints, there's a little bit more that you need to do to them. So the first part is start politely, right? So start by talking to the person and being polite. The second thing, number 2, make the request into a question. So request means, what you're asking somebody to do, right? If you could say, I need my money back, right? That's what you need. You turn it into a question, meaning instead of saying, I need my money back, you say, is there any way I could get my money back? So you turn it into a question instead of telling the person what to do. The next thing you need to do is explain the problem. And then after that is don't blame the person you are working with. And number 5, tell them your expectations, right? This is an important one. So the first part, start politely. Now I have some kind of like phrases that you can use when you're doing this. So the first one is, excuse me. So sometimes if you are walking into a store to return something or a refund, but you don't really know where to go or you don't know who can help you, you want to stop somebody or go to a front desk and be like, oh, excuse me, can you help me? Excuse me, I am wondering if you can help me. Or, I'm sorry to bother you. This is one that you can use a lot. Like, oh, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need some help. So that's what it means to start politely. Start with excuse me, can you help me? I'm sorry to bother you, but I need some help. I'm wondering if you can help me. That's what it means to start politely. So the next part, you can do, let me move this around. Okay, so the next part is make the request into a question. So you can use things like would, could, or can, right? So when you make the request into a question, when you make what you're asking, them to do into a question. So what is it that you need to do? So you need to talk to somebody. So you would say, could you tell me who I need to talk to? Can you tell me where I need to go? Would you help me understand the bill I received? So instead of, if you're calling them on the phone, instead of saying, I don't understand my bill, you could say that. But when you're trying to be polite, you could say, would you help me understand the bill I received or the bill I got? Now, the next part is you explain the problem. This is really important because sometimes the person that's helping you, there's a lot of different ways that they can help you. It just depends on what the problem is. So if you don't explain the problem, they may not know or understand what your problem is. And so they'll try to help you, but they're not really helping you because they're not helping you with your problem. So that's why it's important to explain, right? To tell them what is happening and be really, really clear. So the way you can start this by being, and be polite still, is you could say, I think there has been a misunderstanding, right? That misunderstanding just means that something didn't go right because one person didn't understand the other person. And when you say this, it's not blaming anybody. It's not saying, oh, it's your fault, or you're saying, oh, it's my fault, because a lot of times it isn't your fault, right? So when you say, oh, there has been a misunderstanding, it's a sneaky way to not let anybody be blamed, to not blame anybody, but it also lets the person know that something's wrong and it needs to be fixed, right? So you could say, I think there has been a misunderstanding, right? So you go to a hotel, you get a room, and it smells like smoke, but you said, I want a non-smoking room. You say, I think there has been a misunderstanding. I requested a non-smoking room, right? I don't think there are any smoking rooms anymore in the United States, but sometimes this happens. So if you travel outside the US, or maybe there are places in the US that there are smoking rooms, but yeah, you say, I requested a non-smoking room. So you're not blaming anybody, but you're telling the person what the problem is. I think there has been a misunderstanding. I bought the blue bag and got a red one. So you're telling them, you start it politely by saying, I think there was a misunderstanding, and then you tell them what the problem is. I got this instead of this, right? I got this, but I did not get what I ordered. Or if you're talking to like your phone company, you could say, I think there's been a misunderstanding. My phone bill is $100 more than what it usually is. Can you tell me what happened? You just got to explain what happened and make sure that you are really clear about it, right? So the next part is important too. Don't blame the person you are working with. You are all in kind of service positions. So sometimes people will come up to you, right, and tell you something's wrong, but it isn't your fault, right? It's not your fault that something happened. So it's the same when you're complaining to people. Sometimes, most of the time, the person that you talk with is not the person that did the thing that was wrong. So you want to make sure that you're nice to them because they are the ones that are going to help you fix the problem, right? So, and I'm sure you all know this because you have all been working in positions where you're helping people and sometimes they get angry and you're like, isn't my fault, so you don't need to be mad at me. But you could say, the best way to start with this is, but sometimes you still need to let them know that it's wrong and it needs to be fixed, right? So I understand it is not your fault, right? You're talking on the phone to them. You say, I understand it is not your fault, but the airline, oh, I have a bit of it covered, the airline told me that I would get my luggage yesterday. So you're telling them, this is still a problem, but I understand it is not your fault. Or if you're starting to get upset, sometimes we can't really help that. So what you can say is, I understand it is not your fault, but I am a little frustrated. So this one is kind of good for you to vent, right? So you can let them know, I understand it is not your fault, but I am a little angry. I've been trying to figure this out for a whole month. It's been crazy. Can you help me? So don't blame the person you are working with, but I'm sure you guys already know this, but I put it in anyways. A good phrase to use is, I understand it is not your fault. So tell them your expectations. So this one is good because sometimes, not all the time, sometimes companies will, not on purpose, but sometimes on purpose, try to get more money from you. Or mislead you, right? They'll say, oh, it's only this much, but then they charge you more. So tell them your expectations, right? Tell them what you were expecting. So for example, you could say, I understood that. So you'll see that this one before, you say, I understand it is not your fault. So this one we say understand because it's simple present tense. Because we're talking to the person and we're letting them know, right now, I understand it is not your fault. But if you are telling somebody your expectations, it's about what you thought was going to happen, what you were told in the past. So you use understood. I understood that shipping would only take 10 days. So you're letting them know what you were told in the past, the information and the knowledge that you have in the past. Or another one is, I understood that the bike rental was only $15 an hour, not $25 an hour. So that's another thing. So you're telling them you're telling them your expectations so they know why you're upset or why you were calling or why you were telling them this. But it's also letting them know, like, hey, I was told this and it needs to be done that way, you know? So it just depends. It's it's just being polite, but also being, sticking up for yourself. So, talking about sticking up for yourself. So first off, some of you might not know what stick up for yourself means in English. So if people say stick up for yourself, it just means to, this is another expression, stand up for yourself. Stick up or stand up for yourself just means to if something happens to you that's wrong, it's okay to tell people that was wrong. That's what sticking up for yourself or stand up for yourself means. It means that, a lot of stuff isn't your fault. You should not be blamed for things that you didn't do, right? That you had no power over, right? You didn't have control over it. Things that you can't help, right? So if you get in trouble for getting sick at work, you shouldn't get in trouble for that because you can't help it if you get sick. So sticking up for yourself would be, hey, you can't get mad at me for being sick. So it is important to be patient, right, when we talk with people. But if you pay for a service, you should receive it, right? That's kind of the rule. You give them the money and then they perform the service, right? If it's not happening and it's something that they can change, then yeah, it's okay to complain. If you are given expectations, right, you're told something that things will be a certain way, if you're given expectations at work or where you live, it is okay to complain, right? It's pretty much okay to complain anytime. If you live in an apartment building and the apartment said, oh, like your toilet is broken, and they say, we'll come and fix it today, and they don't come today, they don't go to fix it on that day, you totally can call them and complain and say, you said that you would come and fix this. But obviously, you'd want to be polite about it. So you would say, hey, I'm wondering if you can help me, right? I'm wondering if you can help me. I was told that someone would come to fix my toilet, but they haven't, right? So that's how you would do a formal complaint. So why is it better to be polite? We all know this, right? People want to help others when they are nice to them. So if you are nice to somebody, the person that you're talking to will want to help you, right? Or most likely want to help you. Asking people for help is more polite than telling people what to do. So that's why we make them questions when we're getting help. We ask them for help because it's more polite in America and in English, Western countries in general. It's more polite to ask for help than to tell them what to do, right? Then, it's better to do it that way. So that's it for today.